Hello and welcome to the Spiraling Higher podcast, hosted by me, Sam, mindset and manifestation coach.
And me, Gina, your biz and mindset coach. We're here to support you on your spiritual journey by bringing you intimate and raw conversations about healing, manifestation, consciousness, and spirituality.
We hope this podcast makes you feel less alone as you become aware of your patterns and limiting beliefs to up-level your life, manifest like a boss, and together, spiral higher. So everyone actually thinks I live in a commune now from following my stories from this past weekend.
It definitely looked like that.
I know. I had people messaging me literally being like, where is this? Like, how do I join? I don't actually live on a commune. I was able to experience what it would be like, though, because this past weekend, my partner's aunt turned 60, and she has a huge group of friends, family, neighbors, and she's a wonderful woman. She's a Cancer. And so it seems so fitting that she was throwing this huge party during the new moon in Cancer. And there were about 60 to 70 people there.
Wow.
And it was awesome. It was a weekend of fun. But I was telling Gina earlier that we had these little job boards where you could sign up for lunch cleanup, lunch cook, dinner clean, dinner cook. And so it was this beautiful assembly line of us all doing our little jobs and kind of like earning our keep in the community. And it was just so fun. And I just kept joking with everyone that this must be what commune life is like.
Yeah, that or like sister wives.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't actually want a commune, but it was joyous. It was a lot of grounding in nature, and it's exactly what I needed after a lot of the conversations that Gina and I have been having with each other about, like resetting our nervous system, literally feeling the freaking earth like beneath my feet is just so. Yeah.
And even just having that kind of communal support in your day, like waking up, knowing you're going to be eating and feeding people too, and everybody kind of has their place. I don't know, the whole thing felt very like utopia-ish vibes.
It really did. I thought like this is great because it's 3 days, but I don't really know how this would go if it was like 3 years. I mean, all communes, I think, historically turn out to be cults, so I'm not really sure how it would go if it was long term.
Yeah.
But like Gina said, there is something to be said about living amongst community.
Yeah.
And there was something so beautiful about, like she said, waking up every morning and knowing that I was going to be in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, and we all shared coffee and tea together and we're telling stories. And I thought about how that is how humans were literally socialized for years and years.
Yeah.
Like eons. It was like story time around the fire. Literally, that's what we did. It's like telling stories about, they were a lot older, a lot of the people there. So they're telling stories about their childhood, their 30s. And I just thought, wow, this is literally what it was like when you would just kind of sit around with your elders.
Well, now
around the fire.
You do that, but digitally, right? You wake up, you go to your Instagram, and you've got your like thousands of people that you're following, and you're just checking in with them, but they're not actually there. But it's like
a one-way street.
Yeah. You're kind of just like creeping on everyone else. It's like you looking into the commune, like not actually participating.
Yeah, you're not participating.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's definitely a loss of exchange. And I mean, that's why we love our community so much.
Yeah.
Because there's actually exchanges happening. We have our monthly free calls. If you post a comment, someone will comment back.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like it's mostly on social media, just you following people that you like and you leaving comments, but they don't comment back.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love that.
Actually,
what?
Yeah, I was going to say one of my favorite creators actually liked my comment, and that was really exciting. And I was like, oh, he liked the comment. He didn't respond.
It's actually so funny, though, when you actually think about what that is. It's like, oh, my God, he liked my comment. It's like, no, he tapped his phone. He literally
pressed
took his index finger or his thumb and pushed on his phone. But it's like that is what engagement or connecting is nowadays. It's just... But to see that in contrast to what you experienced, where people were actually engaging with you, like putting their arms around you, like passing you a bowl of food. Yeah. And just like playing. Like I saw so many of those videos with you playing with the kids and like running in the field and picking like the vegetables. Like that's real engagement. Everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful. Like I had a great time, but I'm also not so delusional to think that, like, this is how I want to live forever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a phase that a lot of people go through during their spiritual awakening, their journey, where it's like, I just want to like go off the grid and completely forget modern life and just grow all my own food. I think there is definitely a beauty to that, but also there was a beauty to this when I came home and knew that I was going to connect with you and bring my mic out. It was exciting. I love technology. And so there's a little bit of both that you can infuse into your life for sure.
Well, yeah, because on the flip side of that, like even though we were just making fun of social media and how someone is just like literally tapping their phone, it's like you have access to so many more people. I mean, the fact that we can even launch. We met on Instagram, yeah. But even the fact that this podcast is reaching people around the world through technology, and we can continue to foster those relationships on a website like our community or in our Instagram. So I think that on both ends of the spectrum, you know, there's I guess 2 ways of looking at it, and really could work for you in some ways and maybe some not. So yeah, I think it's all.
Yeah, and you just don't have to pick. You don't have to pick one or the other. I think that's the best thing about the human experience is you can have a little bit of everything. I was actually, because I was around so many people who are older than me, I was telling them a little bit about my line of work. And a lot of them are like, what is that? Social media and like your podcast? Like it was a lot of conversations like that. But I love that I got to actually talk about what amazing opportunities have come from it because their perspective is that, you know, like, oh, like this is all that matters, like family and being around the fire. And I'm not rejecting that. I just think you can find beauty in both. And so I love that I got to bring a little bit of my world to theirs and then take a little bit of theirs with mine. It was a beautiful, it was a sacred exchange. It was fun.
Well, I think that ties in really nicely to our episode that you're about to listen into with it, which is with Andrea Freemyer, who is actually one of my mentors from my breathwork program, and she is a neuroscientist. And so she was always teaching the modules about like the brain and what's happening to our nervous system. And so I think when it comes to any aspect of life, whether it's on social media or with like a bunch of family members, it's really all about tuning into how your nervous system is responding, right? Because you could be on social media and have it be completely sending your nervous system out on a wild ride, but you could also experience social media and have it be completely soothing and fine. So I think that it really, one of the things that I've really been embodying in my life is living my life according to my nervous system, or at least like soothing it when it needs to be soothed. Whereas before, my nervous system was really not a part of the equation. But now my nervous system is generally my compass for what I say yes to and how I respond to things and what I participate in.
Yeah, I mean, I have learned to not say yes to everything. I was actually going to tell you before this episode that I was invited for this trip in August, and I have a lot of other trips already happening in August, and I want to say yes to everything.
I know, right? Especially you.
Everything. Especially me, but I'm trying to ask my body now what it needs to operate as optimally as it can. And to my brain, yes, I want to do all the things. And that's the thing that we actually learn to differentiate with Andrea, who is a neuroscientist, you know, what the mind thinks it's capable of versus what the body is capable of. So a lot of us are operating, obviously, in the society with running by, you know, our ego, our programming, our mind. And it has a lot of dictations on what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And it goes beyond a lot of the body's capability. And so the body literally rebels, which isn't a rebellion technically. It's more like a signal. It's telling us, our mind, hey, this is too much. But we don't listen. And we use a lot of suppressants, and eventually those become ineffective. And so we actually dive really deeply into all of our personal stories with nervous system dysregulation. You could call it anxiety, you could call it depression. I even shared my stories of when I literally could just barely get out of bed. I had life-ending thoughts. I was like telling Gina I was never going to be happy again, like no purpose. And having Andrea on talk about as an educator on the nervous system helped me see that that wasn't a character flaw, that wasn't a character deficit. This was actually a hallmark traits and characteristics of a particular nervous system state that is temporary. And so we really, really go into how to notice and become aware of which state you're in and disidentify from that state yourself, because we take it on as our personality. Oh, I'm lazy, or oh, I'm crazy, or you know, I'm just wired this way. You're not. Your body is obviously wired to have certain reactions depending on the stimuli, but that is not your personality or your state of being, and you can learn to heal that.
I really like how she walked us through kind of, I guess, like the more scientific explanations of everything, and also what to do when you're in those states. And she talks a lot about the science of breath work at the end as well. So, I mean, I obviously learned from her in my course, but I learned so much more in this episode as well, because I think we were able to really apply like our own personal experiences to it as well. But it was really comforting to hear once again that there's nothing wrong with me. And it's actually that my nervous system is so wise and works so well that I experience these states. And that for me was very comforting.
It's almost like, when you're a little kid and you want to go hang out with your friends and your mom's like, no, you're too tired. You need to stay home and take a nap. And you're like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I feel fine. And then you totally pass out. It's like your nervous system and your brain have this internal guidance. It knows for you what is best, when to rest, what to eat, right? And we disobey.
Yeah.
We're like, no, I can ignore those signals. I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever I want. And especially in a society that rewards a lot of just ambitious, constant hustling behavior, like we talked about in one of our previous episodes, it's so hard to redefine then what success means for you. Mm-hmm. And so hearing the science behind it and really understanding what is going on in my brain and body when I feel anxiety or when I feel quote unquote depression, it's going to just literally change your paradigm. And when you change how you relate to yourself, everything changes. And so being able to hear from such a well-educated person's perspective on this issue, it just opened up a lot of doors for me. So I hope it will for everyone who listens.
Yeah, I think you're all going to walk away from it making more sense of yourself and the things that you experience and why you experience it.
Yeah, it's going to be super juicy. So stick around to hear the rest of Andrea's episode, and we can't wait to hear what you think about this one.
Hey, spiralers, we found something that we could not wait to tell you about.
We have got for you some spiritual tea. Actually, it's not tea at all, but it is our new favorite meditation app, Superhuman.
We're literally obsessed with this. I love it because unlike other meditation apps we've used before, it has meditations you can do as you go about your day, not just when you're sitting or lying down. My favorite are the getting ready ones that are about 20 minutes long with affirmations that you can listen to as you start your morning, or the midday pep talks, which are only 2 or 3 minutes long, and they even have specific tracks for moms.
Yeah, there's so many options, and I really like how these meditations are aimed at helping you tap into the emotions of what you want to attract. Mm-hmm. They're accompanied with really moving, motivational musical tracks, and they're just not boring. They don't just ask you to sit there and try to clear your mind. Instead, I feel like I'm in my own music video and I'm tuning into the frequency of my future self.
Yeah, I actually feel like I'm in my own movie when I'm listening to them.
I know, me too, especially when I'm doing the walking ones. Mm-hmm. There's like specific walking ones where Mimi's voice, who actually voices all of the tracks, she's like, and as you walk into your future, I literally feel like I'm commanding this energy. And that's the entire point of the meditation, is to really tune into a higher frequency. And so with our code, you can try the Superhuman app with 1 free month in addition to their trial offer of 2 complimentary weeks. That's 6 entire free weeks to tune into the frequency of your highest timeline.
So abundant. We want you to try it for yourself and let us know what you think, because you have absolutely nothing to lose. And you can redeem your free 6 weeks of the Superhuman app now by clicking the link in our show notes and using the code Spiraling Higher with no spaces.
We know you're going to love this one, and we feel confident that your vibrations are going to spiral higher.
Welcome, Andrea, to the Spiraling Higher podcast. We are so excited to talk to you. I have been waiting for this day, counting down ever since we've been in the breathwork program, or ever since I've been in the breathwork program. So to start off this episode, we would love for you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into neuroscience and maybe even how you got into breathwork. Tell us everything.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I've very much been looking forward to this as well. So, yeah, sometimes when I look at my journey, I'm like, how the hell did I get here? And at the same time, it also makes so much sense. So I really have, for like all of my life, I've wanted to help people. I've wanted to just better understand like why there's so much suffering, like why there's so much hurt. And this was really a personal thing as well, because I was feeling this and seeing this a lot in my like inner circle, in my family and my close friends. And so when it was my turn to go to college, I just decided that I would do psychology. I would take that route. I would be able to help people. I would be able to understand the human mind and how it functions and why all of this is happening, and also have ways to help support people. And what I discovered in that is that that wasn't really my path. Like that, I still wanted to help people, but I wasn't really able to go at it like I wanted to. I didn't learn the stuff about the brain that I was really interested in. And I had went and worked at a psychiatric hospital for a little while and just saw how broken the system was. And that was just a lot. It was just a lot to experience, a lot to witness. And there was very much this piece of like, I can't, with what I know, I'm not going to be able to help these people. And so then I was like, well, I want more. I want to go deeper. So I went into to start studying neuroscience. I wanted to understand like what was the underlying stuff that was going on here. And so that's when I signed up for the neuroscience program, and I really threw myself into that. I mean, it was like, this is what I'm doing with my life. I was so passionate about it. I was learning so much. I was eating all of it up. And after I worked through all of that. And after I graduated from that program, I got done and I was like, wait, like I still don't really feel like I feel like I understand the brain on a deeper level. Like this education is really valuable. I can see that. But I also don't really know how to help people. Like it was still just very elusive to me. And what I had understood and kind of how I had lived my life is like, I can figure everything out at the level of my mind. Like I can solve problems with this big, beautiful brain that I have. And that's all that I need. But what I discovered in my own life was like, I was like hitting my head up against a wall. Like it was like, okay, I know all of this stuff. I have all this knowledge, but it's still like, I still feel like shit. And so do the people in my life. And I'm like, I still don't know how to help people. So I graduated from that program. And when I graduated, I realized that in my quest to try to figure out how to help other people, I was abandoning myself. I was abandoning my own felt experience. I was abandoning just what was going on inside of myself. And so I'd been through some really painful things in my teenage years and up into like early adulthood. And I just didn't really ever address those. I didn't really ever do anything about any of that because I was like, no, I'm really good at school. I'll just like throw myself into this and this will be. And so I realized that I had really been abandoning myself and I was really looking for like the magic cure, right? In school, I was looking for that. Like, let me find this thing outside of myself to help me and find my purpose. And so during that time, I became a mom and that really gave me purpose. Like, I was like, okay, this is my purpose. I get to show up for my son. I really started to take care of myself in a different way. I started to eat better. I started to exercise. I started a meditation practice. So I was like really like building this foundation. And I felt like I was getting somewhere, but it was still just very surface level stuff.
Yeah.
And then kind of during that time, my marriage had kind of been falling apart behind the scenes the whole time I was in school. Also something I wasn't allowing myself to feel or address. And I was like, I'm a mom. I can do this. It'll be fine, you know? And a few months after graduating, my husband at the time actually took his own life.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in that experience and having, you know, I mean, my whole foundation, like everything
Just
that I believe to be safe, you know, was, even though it wasn't true safety, and I now see that, but like was gone. It was like, you know, he was gone. There was this complicated grief sitting right in front of me. I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills. I didn't know how I was going to take care of my son. I didn't know. It was just like everything was just like, what? I have no idea how to move through this. And I've always had a really deep connection to nature. That's really the only time that I have felt like connection to source, connection to like the spiritual realm is just to go out, be like surrounded by woods and the trees and the water. And so I had spent a lot of time doing that in those like early days after. It was like the only place I felt like I could just be, like just allow me, because there's so much that happens when somebody dies that you have to take care of that you don't even consider before.
Yep.
And especially the manner of the death, there was just so much. And so I would go lay in nature as like my refuge. And one morning, really early morning, because I barely slept during that time, I was watching the sunrise and I just heard this voice. I just heard this presence that was so much louder than me say, Andrea, you have to feel this. Like, you have to feel this. That's the only way through. And at the time, I'm like, fuck off.
You're like, I don't want to feel any of this. Too heavy.
Right. And there had been so many other things that I had pushed down. It's like, oh, now I'm going to start feeling, that kind of thing. And so I had all these numbing behaviors, all of these things that I had been engaging in for so many years in my life. And of course, I used those soon after. But what I discovered was, and like that message came through and I was like, wow, that's really powerful, but no, and not right now. I was like still very much in shock and just very wrapped up in all the things. And eventually the numbing wasn't numbing anything anymore. There was too much pain. There was too much heaviness. And so everything that I had reached for to numb didn't work. So it was about that time that breathwork landed in my field, in my experience. Nothing that I was looking for. I mean, I was looking for something. Like there was something inside of me that was looking, like this wisdom that I wasn't aware of, was looking for something. And I did a breathwork session and I felt my body for the first time in a really long time. And what I discovered in those moments that were also really scary, because I was like, wow, there's so much here to feel. I was so raw. I was so open. And so I didn't do it for very long, but I was like, I knew just in that those short moments that this is what I need. Like, this is going to help me. And so I really latched on to, and I was still like working at the hospital, like in the research hospital and doing all of that. But I was throwing myself into this like healing modality. Like I was doing it as often as I could. And a lot of times what would happen is I would take like 4 breaths and then I would just cry for however long. Yeah. But it was like, it really gave me this like deep sense of safety. Like I was able to connect into safety without even really knowing what I was doing. But I was like, oh, I don't have to figure all of this out. This thing that doesn't make any fucking sense. I have to just feel it. And I have this whole body that I've been neglecting for most of my life to help me do that. And so I used breathwork in my own healing experience. And then I was like, it was so powerful for me that I decided I wanted to train to share it with other people. So that's how I signed up for the breathwork training program. And then it was only after I had the experience, right, where I had felt how much it shifted, how much it changed within me, that I had like the bandwidth or the capacity to be like, oh, there's so much science to support this. There's so many benefits to this. And the education that I have is so helpful in understanding what's going on in the body. So I eventually, because my job at the university was like so much, and my mind functioned very differently after experiencing that trauma. It just took a while for me to be able to come back. And sometimes like my brain still doesn't work the same way. But to be able to take the science and put it into this thing that my heart is so committed to and so connected to. And it's like, now I have this science. I've been able to live my heart's desire to heal myself, to help guide other people through that journey, and to like marry the two together. So there's like, there's such a powerful, I feel the way that I like to describe what I do a lot of times is because of my experience, because of my education, and just my connection to like nature and source. It's like, I'm like the bridge between like the mystical and the scientific. It's like we can there's so much unseen that I just denied for so long. I'm like, I can't touch it. I can't see it. I can't feel it. It doesn't exist. I was a scientist, right? And so I've really been able to take my life experience and moving through that and kind of like bring them together. And it's just been so powerful. So powerful.
Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful story, and thank you so much for vulnerably opening up about how you got here. But there's a couple things I want to mirror back for you and our audience. I mean, number one being that I don't even think that you could have realized you felt unsafe until you experienced the safety through the session. I think a lot of us operate at that level or at that state of consciousness, that state of being. We don't even realize that we feel unsafe or that the body feels unsafe until you experience that felt sense of being in your body. And you're like, wow, I haven't been inside of here for maybe years. Like I've just been this floating head. And then the other thing I wanted to beautifully reflect is that it really is so strange for all of us that our worst moments of suffering, they always give birth to our life purpose. And so despite everything that's happened to you, and some of it was so heartbreaking for us to hear, it's what got you here right now. Yeah. And so we're really excited to dive in. And I have a question about this now. Based on everything you've learned about neuroscience and how you've blended breathwork together and all these practices to help both yourselves and your clients, what do you now know scientifically about the states of consciousness you were in before? That state of like intellectualizing and trying to figure out, that not feeling. What was actually happening in your brain and body back then?
Yeah, I was really just like pendulating through both like survival states. Like I was either like in this like sympathetic, I've got to do all of these things. I've got to like prove my worth. I've got to make sense of everything. It was very, very just like driven by this like chaotic energy that was in my body. So we can call that, like the sympathetic state. And specifically in my experience, then I was in a sympathetic survival state. So I was beyond something called the window of tolerance, in which we can tolerate our experience. And I was outside of that, just existing in this like go survival state. Didn't feel comfortable in my own skin if I would stop, right? So I was like always doing something.
There's like a proving energy.
Yes, very much. And then, or sometimes I would be in the complete opposite side of that spectrum where I would just like shut down and tune everybody out and tune out my own sense of feeling and numb and just be, it was like I would be so overwhelmed by the sympathetic energy that was moving through my body that I would burn myself out. I would go till I couldn't anymore, and then I would shut down. And there was no in between. It was like either this or this. So I was just kind of moving.
And does the body do that naturally? Like, does it just kind of automatically do that because it's now in sympathetic for so long that it just shuts down on its own?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like a protection mechanism, right? The brain's like, hey, like we can't operate at that level, right?
Yeah. And it's actually, it's such, when we understand this, it really can be so empowering. Because we realize, like, I'm not broken. There is nothing wrong with me. This is my body's beautiful mechanism to protect me. Because what I experienced was too much, too fast, too soon. It was, and not just my husband's death. It was things that I had experienced before that I just wasn't really allowing myself to face. And so being in those different states is what was getting me through. It was what was allowing me to live my life, but I wasn't really living, right? I was just surviving.
Just surviving, right? I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the hallmarks of these states so that our listeners can begin to understand that these hallmarks or these traits that exist within these survival paradigms, these are not actually character flaws or deficits of your own being, right? Because all I hear from people who are in these states is, I am lazy or something is wrong with me. I might need medication, right? A lot of pathologization of these states when in reality, your body, like you said, it's a beautiful mechanism to protect you. But because you have a mind, you can create a story around these states. And a lot of them are pointing back at the self and saying, I'm wrong, I'm lazy, I'm not doing enough. And this is also perpetuating that state as well. So I would love for you to sort of scientifically break down for us, like, what are the hallmarks of these states so that people can begin to discern, oh, like that's a state that I recognize. And so for next time, they can also discern that that's the state that they're in, rather than making up a story about how they're somehow inadequate or insufficient.
Yeah, sure. That's such a beautiful question, beautiful offering. So I'll just talk about the ones first that are so well known. So we hear oftentimes, especially in circles like this, of like, oh, it's like fight or flight. I'm in fight or flight. I have to be doing something all the time. There's this like when we're in, and that's the sympathetic pathway of the autonomic nervous system. So just to be clear, the autonomic nervous system is everything outside of the brain and the spinal cord. So it's all of these nerves running through our body that interact with all the organs in our body, right? And so when we're in sympathetic, when we're in that pathway of the nervous system, we are feeling just there's like this chaos. There's this like constant energy moving through the body. Like I always have to be that feeling of like, I got to do everything. And I can't be still. There's a hypervigilance. So perceiving a threat when there is no threat that's actually present. There is this like reactionary component to that. It's like everything that happens is like, oh, this is targeted towards me. Like there's like a victim mentality that's present there. And instead of processing the anger, feeling the anger, there's this aggression that can a lot of times come out. We can also feel just very anxious and like unsettled in the body when we're in that sympathetic state. And also to speak to your point of like, there's actually nothing wrong with us for being in that state of our nervous system, even when we're like outside of our window of tolerance. It's our body's way of allowing us to continue to move through life, right? And so it's just this really, really beautiful way of surviving, but it can also really lead to a lot of chronic things if we stay there for very long. Then, do you want me to keep going, or did you?
Yes. No, keep going.
Yeah, I just have one question or sort of addition to this. I also imagine from that state, there's a lot of future fixation. I find that my clients who are really panicked about future, and I know Gina's been there a lot, it just automatically now signals to me, oh, you're in that state, because it's the way that we create predictability and an illusion of control, right? Which only needs to happen when we feel unsafe. Yes. And so what's interesting for Gina and I, as we've sort of thawed ourselves from that sympathetic state and come back into safety, there's not as much future fixation for us. We're very aligned and in the present, and we set goals for the future, but we're not attached to goals. And so Gina and I have noticed that when we start getting what I call grippy, like when I start getting really like, okay, like I need to make sure this happens, and then I have to do that, and then I get really control-y about things, it automatically indicates to me that I'm in the state.
Yeah, for sure. And there's like such a rigidity to it. Like there's not a lot of flexibility. It's like it's either this or nothing. Like I have to have this happen or I'm going to die. Like, I mean, that's literally like belief, deep down belief. Yes. It's like I have to do this. And if this doesn't work out the way that I want it to, and then I'm not going to be okay.
Yeah. And there's a lot of our clients that are under this really deep illusion that they have to control everything, right? They're like, I have to, because if I don't, then everything's going to go to shit. Everything's going to fall apart. Like this is how I keep things together. But it's like, this is not together. Right. Like this is actually not together, but we think it is. And so I think a lot of people in that state just obviously get quite, I don't want to say manic, but you're just kind of trying to do so many things at the same time, because I guess that makes you feel like you're doing something and you do have a sense of control. But it just looks like you're just running around like a chicken with their head cut off, right?
Yeah, it's like,
and it's actually inducing more of that state,
that
energy.
For sure. Yeah, it's like trying to find safety. I mean, I think that's like what's actually happening, but we don't have that awareness when it's happening, right? Like we're like trying to find safety, but we're trying to find it in everything outside of ourselves. And the reality is that like life is just uncertain. And it's this need to find certainty because that feels safer, because uncertainty feels very untethering and very like, oh my God, I don't know what my future holds. That can be really, that can feel really scary if you don't have a sense of safety within yourself and a sense of trust.
Exactly. Yeah. Like even thinking to myself, oh my God, the future is so uncertain. That only triggers me when I'm in that state of non-safety. But what's interesting is when Gina and I are in the state of safety, when we think about how uncertain the future is, all we see is possibilities.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden my perception of the uncertain future is a very welcoming, inviting, expansive thing. But when it gets really reductive and like, oh my God, like only bad things can happen, that's how, again, I know that I'm in this state. And so I'm hoping that as people are listening, they're starting to identify characteristics or hallmarks of the state so that they don't have to identify with like, I am this type of person that is lazy, or I am this type of person who is always on the go, right? These are representative of the states that you may be shifting in and out of. And so I then want to talk about how if we're in that sympathetic state for so long, like you talked about, the natural next step is to come down into the depressed, overwhelmed state. And so can you talk a little bit more about that state from like a scientific point of view?
Yeah, sure. So it's really like when we're holding this much energy in the body for so long, we could only sustain that for a certain period of time before our body's like, this is too much. Like all of our organs are like, this is too much. I can't do this anymore. I need repair. I need to rebuild myself. I need some wellness in my system. But what actually ends up happening when we're that overwhelmed and that stuck in for an extended period of time, so it becomes chronic, right? We can shut down. And that's kind of like the opposite side of the spectrum of the autonomic nervous system. So it's what's called specifically the dorsal vagus pathway, where it's also known as like rest and digest. And so we can, and this is actually important for both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, or the rest and digest, is we can experience like different flavors of these states that are actually really important for us to experience, right? Like it's important for us to have energy in the system to do things, but it's when it's with outside our window of tolerance that it becomes a survival thing, right? And so we need to rest and digest. We need to slow down. When our body slows down, all of our organs do the things that they're supposed to be doing, like before we get ready to go to bed or something. But when we're outside of our window of tolerance in the dorsal vagus pathway, that is like this, I don't even care anymore. I don't have a will to live. Like, why even bother? Like just this very I'm going through the motions, but I'm not actually here. Like I'm just doing the things without even thinking about it. And that is when we can feel that like deep depression and just like we have no desire. We have no desire to continue living. And so again, when we're there, we're just very much, we're like, our body is not able to do its natural thing to be able to get us back into safety, back into a stable place. We're just kind of, when we're in that like outside our window of tolerance and we're there for a chronic period of time, an extended period of time, then that's just kind of, we can start to identify with like, well, this is just how I am. You know, I'm just lazy. Yeah. I'm so unmotivated. Like, what is wrong with me? When really it's just your body's way of responding to having too much energy in the system for too long.
Yeah. I'm so curious because just with the work that we do, obviously, and even between Sam and I, like we obviously respond to different things very differently. But I think one of my traits, or what I thought was one of my traits, is this high capacity for stress, right? So I never really had this pendulum swing very often for me. I kind of just operated in this very high adrenaline state for honestly like 2 decades. And I would have some breakdowns, but I would just bounce right back. I never really got into a dorsal state where I would just be laying in bed. I recently, we talked about this on a recent episode, that I did start to experience panic attacks as I was starting to gear down out of adrenaline. Then my body like collapsed. And I actually felt so much worse. And it was actually really confusing because I was like, when I'm sleeping more, I'm taking care of myself, but I feel terrible. I actually felt like I was really drunk. And so I'm curious to know, I'm assuming obviously everybody has different, I don't want to say the word capacity, but like, do some people, are they able to stay in a higher state of adrenaline and that kind of sympathetic state longer than others? And if so, why? Like, why, what is the difference that's happening inside of our body?
For sure. And I think like part of that just has to do with our genetic makeup. It just has to do with our genes, with what our life has been like, what our childhood was like, what our adulthood was like the experiences that we've been through. So it's important to understand that we do all have a baseline level of activation that we can hold, and a baseline level of, like rest that we can hold in our system and still feel safe, right? Like that's that window of tolerance. Probably what was happening in your case is you did have this just like wider window of tolerance to hold your life. Like you were so used to just like feeling this energy in your body. It was your baseline. It was your norm. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Until it gets to the point of like, unless we're not aware of like, wow, I haven't actually like given myself space and time to rest. Like I haven't actually stopped going for 20 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so probably what was happening there was like it just became too much for your system. And you realized that, you had the awareness to realize that. And so you decided to start making some changes, it sounds like. And now your body's like, what the hell is happening? Why aren't we go? So you're like, almost like what is happening is you're reestablishing a new baseline. Like your body's like, why are you resting? Like, and it doesn't feel comfortable, right? Like it doesn't, there's like other symptoms and stuff that come along with that while your body is getting used to this. It's almost like you're building a capacity for slowness now, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this doesn't even touch on the sort of like mental socialization of these things too, because in addition to the body increasing its capacity for slowness, which is, physiologically a good thing for us, the mind is like, but now we're lazy.
Yes.
Now we're unmotivated. Yeah. Now we're not ambitious, and now we're not going after it. And so it's so sad to me that a lot of what is celebrated, like this really wide window of tolerance, let's say for Gina, and for many people who operate in this capitalist society, right? We're rewarding that stretching of the window of tolerance, maybe even surpassing it to continue to strive on the outside. And we are not valuing this capacity for slowness, this rest and digest. We only see that as problematic. And so we're not well, right? I look at our society and I think about how many people are taking medications and are honestly just burnt out. They're in that dorsal vagal state, and seeing it, like I said earlier, this character deficit, like this severe like motivation problem. And this a literal character flaw, like something is wrong with me that I can't maintain this. But I think, and I hope after hearing you, a scientist, that this is not your personality or your values that are being in question. It really just is a natural byproduct of your body doing its best to survive.
Yeah. I think what was interesting about my journey as I was kind of gearing down was that as I was trying to release adrenaline from my body and settle and find safety, it like created so much fear. So then it's like in doing the thing that's trying to settle my nervous system, it activated my nervous system, because it was like, wait, but what is going to happen with your business? What's going to happen with this? How will you figure out how to do that? And I think that I called it a World War Gina inside of me, because it really felt like my nervous system was almost like attacking itself. And so, I guess I just wanted to normalize that for people, that it can be a bit of it kind of gets worse before it gets better, I think. So, for anyone who's doing that, what are some ways that we can kind of help ourselves? I mean, for me, I just really allowed myself as much rest as I needed. I was like, this is just my new pace. I'm going to just try my best to function in the way that I can, but to really honor and listen to my body. But for so many people, they don't even really know what that means to listen to your body. What they're actually doing is just still listening to their mind. So how can we connect more with our nervous system in a way to support it better, I guess, when we're in these states?
Yeah, great question. And this will really be unique to every person, right? Because it's like, what is your understanding of this? Like, what is your awareness? What is your connection to your body? Because something that we haven't touched on yet in regards to the nervous system is we also have this third pathway, right? As under the polyvagal theory, that is the ventral vagus pathway. This I like to call the safety pathway. So this is something that so many people don't know. We're not taught this. I wasn't taught this in my 7 years of school, like that we actually have a physiological pathway that allows us to connect to safety in the body. And so when we're in that place, just to give some like characteristics of what it's like to be there, and please guide me back to your question if I forget to go there. But I feel like this is important building up to that. So if we are feeling like we're okay to be slow, like we're okay to rest, there can still be some activation in the body, but it's like there's also like this knowing or this realization within the cells, within the nervous system, within the body, not just the mind, that's like, okay, like I can do this. Like this is part of that repatterning. And the body just knows.
Like a non-reactivity.
Yes. And so to allow ourselves to go slow, to allow ourselves to truly rest, which is so different than like, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but like, watching a series on Netflix that is like, that's like our definition of rest. It's like there's still all this stimulation coming in, right? And so it's really true like reparative rest. That's important. And until we feel safety in the body, that's gonna be really uncomfortable. So even when we're resting, we're gonna have something, music, a book, the TV, somebody to have a conversation with, right? And again, none of that stuff is bad. It's just like, what are you actually doing? And are you actually allowing yourself to rest, right? And so when we're in this pathway of safety, we feel safe to rest, but also on the other side, we feel safe to feel the activation in the body. So like in your case, when you're coming down from this adrenaline high, you're feeling all this activation, you're feeling like sensations that are leading to a panic, right? And even though that's really scary and can feel really unsettling, it's like you have the awareness to know like, okay, there's something happening here. Like I've been going for so long. This is like my body's like recalibrating itself, right? Yeah. So somebody that doesn't have, back to your question, like somebody that doesn't have that sense of safety within themselves, it's gonna be really hard to just allow themselves to just lay there, right? And so,
or even just the awareness of the states like we've talked about. I'm sure it'll be easier for them now to be like, oh, like I'm now transitioning out of a state. Yeah. Whereas I think most people don't have this information. I mean, you went to school for 5, 6, 7 years and still didn't have this information. So people don't actually know what is going on. Like we don't have a lot of emotional, physiological intelligence. Like we don't trust our bodies.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So that being said, also remembering like how much, like, can we, like you said, you just allowed yourself, right? Like that's really hard for people to do as well, because we do have these stories in the mind that have been running on repeat for so long. So there is, even though I believe that that we got to begin in the body for sustainable healing, there is a time and a place where the mindset becomes so important, because while we're going into the body and we're shifting and changing things on a cellular level and we're understanding that, we also get to reframe what our experience is. So in the experience that, oh my God, like I'm resting and now I feel sicker than I did when I was going before. For a lot of people, it's like, well, I guess I need to go back to doing that, right? Like something's wrong with me. I'm not meant to just rest. I'm not meant to relax. And so it's being able to repattern, reframe, which is also repatterning the mind, repatterning the thoughts and those connections of like, it is safe to slow down. It is safe to rest. So at this point, when you're starting to have an awareness of the body and notice shifts and change that are happening there with different somatic practices, breathwork probably being one of the most powerful ones, because it really allows us to go, it's almost like a autonomic nervous system hack, right? Like we can go in and change our breath. And when we change our breath, we can change how our heart is beating. We can change how our organs are functioning. We're changing our inner experience. We're changing our physiology. And so when we're able to do that and we have support in that way, like seek support, get help, of course. And when you have that support and you're starting to move stuff there, then really start to work with affirmations, like reminders to yourself of like, I am safe to slow down. I am safe to rest. I am in the process of finding safety in my body. I am in the process of feeling relaxation in my system. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. And so just like having that understanding that when the repatterning is happening, it's not like we just go from 5,000 to 0 and it's like, oh, this is great. You know, like, and also compassion for, in awareness, I have been, and just speaking to your experience again as an example, I have been in this state for 20 years. And now I'm seeing that this isn't sustainable and I want to choose something different. Doesn't it make sense that it would take some time? You know, and we'll forget that.
It's like a drug detox.
But we forget that because we're like, oh, now I see where I want to be, so I'm ready. And that's part of this like Western medicine culture that we live in of like, immediate. Like, give me something for an immediate fix. Give me a pill. Give me a whatever. And it's like, no, that's not actually how this works. Like, in order for it to be sustainable.
Hey, listeners, quickly interrupting this episode to say that if you're loving this conscious conversation, we're inviting you to join the dialogue with us inside of our free Spiraling Higher community.
It's our favorite place on earth, and it's where you can meet like-minded souls on their healing journey and discuss what you're spiraling through with your conscious besties.
It's where we continue this conversation long after the episode ends because, as we all know, healing is an upward spiral.
So join the conversation, share with us your insights, questions, and breakthroughs. We're here for it all.
You can join by creating a free account by clicking the link at the top of the show notes.
Can't wait to see you in there.
Yeah, and I think it's the when you know it, right? So many people say, well, I know what's happening. Or like, I understand that this is, you know, you have this cognitive awareness or understanding of what's going on, but you're like, but I still feel like crap inside. And that's when we always say like the body doesn't lie. And so there is sometimes, I guess, almost a lag between your body catching up to what your mind knows. Because I think that's where I was confused. Because I was like, I understand the nervous system stuff. I get it. Why don't I feel better? And, you know, on the flip side, so Sam and I are quite on opposite ends of where our nervous systems go when we get activated. And so I'll let you share, Sam, because I remember when you were recently going through like kind of a downward spiral. She was more in dorsal, kind of like not wanting to really do anything. Your question at the time was like, do I let myself rest, or should I be getting up to make myself feel better?
Yeah, I love that you talked a little bit about how long it takes, obviously, for us to come back from these states. And I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, what do you, I mean, obviously, I know there's going to be variations depending on the individual, but just sort of on average, you know, how long can it take someone to really move out of dorsal vagal state once they come into acceptance? Because for me, I'll just explain a little bit about my story. I was last year in that dorsal vagal state where I'm super overwhelmed. I'm totally dissociated. I literally felt like a clown with like face paint on me. Like that's the best way I can describe it. I remember I would put makeup on and I'm just like, it just felt like I wasn't there and I wasn't even putting makeup on my face. Strangest feeling. Yeah. But I now understand that to be dissociation. I had this feeling of impending doom, a ton of future fixation, and honestly life-ending thoughts. I just thought, I don't want to be alive like this. And the statement I remember saying to Gina was, I don't think I'm ever going to be happy again.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's a story that's following your state. But I think it's really important for people to also know that you can only see things from the state that you're in.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard for me to listen to people outside of that state who were observing me saying things like, it'll get better, you'll come back. And so this was my like ultimate trustful surrender into the universe, because I had no mental capacity to believe a different thought. I really thought I'm never going to be happy again. This is my life now. I've lost all my life force. I was a very joyful person, and I had this like literal character, like ego identity death, because I was like, what's happening to me? Like I don't dance anymore. I don't listen to music anymore. I don't roller skate anymore. I don't want to do anything anymore. I want to like shut my business down. And like all of these things made me feel like I was wrong and like I needed to be like medicated or something. And this is not to talk against that, but I'm kind of curious to know from your perspective, what is your perception sort of on depression and things like that, knowing this polyvagal theory? Because for me, my personal experience, and it could be different for other people, but as soon as I was able to employ tools to shift myself out of that state, suddenly my story changes, my perception changes, my orientation to life changes. No longer do I need any sort of like neurochemical addition to my brain to help me, although that might have been helpful at that time. But I'm just kind of curious to know from a neuroscientist perspective, what is your thought on depression with respect to the dorsal vagal state?
Yeah. So, I mean, in both spectrums, right? There's anxiety that's like the sympathetic, like more related to the sympathetic state, and the depression that's more related to the dorsal vagal state. And I truly believe that, especially when it comes to depression and anxiety, that there's not, and this is probably an unpopular opinion among scientists, especially, but that there's actually not mental disorders, that it's like this is a nervous system disorder. This and even disorder, I don't even like that word. So it's it's a nervous system repatterning, dysregulation for sure. But as we're discovering that that's what's happening, and we're trying to take action to do something different, we like Gina was talking about, like we can feel worse before we feel better. And so sometimes that's where people give up. They're like, no, this isn't working. This isn't what I'm desiring. So I'm just going to give up, or I'm going to reach for the medication, or I'm going to do this thing.
It's the immediate gratification that we often want. Yeah.
And again, like there are times where pharmaceuticals as an intervention is important, of course, for sure. And there needs to be additional support. And that's what doesn't happen a lot of times in our medical system, is it's like, here's this medication, go, you'll be fine. There's sometimes people will see a therapist, sometimes people will go back to the doctor, they'll adjust the amount of the medication. But it's like, the thing about it is we are so unique that there's no way to test like what are the actual chemical imbalances in your brain. So we're going to try this medication that's going to increase the amount of serotonin. Right. Yeah. It's like let's just see, let's a trial and error kind of thing, which it makes sense that that's how we have to do it, because we can't get inside of a still living brain and measure those chemicals. But at the same time, it's at what cost? At what cost are we doing that? And so I think, in my perspective, that is different than a lot of traditional scientist perspective. We are not worrying about the body. We're not even considering the body. We're not considering our lifestyle. We're not considering what we're putting in. We're not considering the energies that there's so many different holistic things, because we are whole individuals, that are not even considered when we're trying to treat depression or anxiety.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So like we're just trying to treat the mind and just leave out the body. And I find that Western medicine has done this like total like separation of like all of our parts. It's like, oh, your knee hurts, like let's put like a steroid shot into your knee. It's like, no, this is from my like neck. It's like connected to the myofascial stuff in my neck. And so there's this total disconnection. And I just wanted to commend you, Andrea, for sharing this perspective, because like you said, it is an unpopular opinion. But just to give you some more further support, I'm actually one of the creators that have been invited for the Mental Health Creator Summit at Harvard University. And a lot of the conversations we've been having are about how we're looking at mental health from basically the incorrect paradigm, right? We are not actually trying to solve a mind problem, right? And believing that it is a mind problem is what's actually perpetuating the problem. It is a more holistic problem. And this, like you said, the solutions are not actually going to create this holistic healing. We're missing like community support too, right? There's no community. It's like, it's just, you're on your own, kid. Here, take this. And it just makes sense that it's not really working. It's not working anymore for people.
And it really hasn't been working for a long time, but it's like there's been no exploration outside of it. Like I don't know the exact stats, but like it was something like there had been like 60 years had gone by before any like depression research on depression medications. So we had like 3 different types, right? That do have different mechanisms for how they work in the brain. And that's what we have. We're not there wasn't a lot of funding to study it. There wasn't, and that's how science works, unfortunately. But there wasn't a lot of funding to study it. There wasn't a lot of just motivation to understand it on a deeper level because it is so complex. It is, when we're trying to solve it as a problem of the mind, we only get so far. Like, why isn't this working? Why aren't people improving? But I think that's why it's so important to and I'm so glad that you're going to be a part of that discussion and that these discussions are happening. I do feel like things are starting to shift. Like we're starting to realize that we are whole people and that we have basic needs like connection and like that support that are just not part of those treatments. And back to what I was saying before, we have not even experimented with what else for like 60 years, what else can we look at to help treat these disorders? And so that's where like ketamine has come online and psilocybin and different therapist-assisted studies like that I think are really starting to change the game. So that in addition to somatic work, I believe that's where it's at. That's where...
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's so hard about this, though, because, I've definitely gone to doctors before because I'm so stressed out. Like, give me something to help me. Like, I need to be able to handle like my life more. And so they can give you something and you feel better and you're like, perfect, I'm good now. And so that's why so many people don't have an understanding that it's not actually working, right? It's just obviously just treating a symptom. And like you said, it's just a matter of time before things will just fall apart. And thank God for that. Right. I think, in the beginning, I was like, F my survival strategies. Like, I hate them, like my nervous system is against me. But no, like that, it's working for you. And like, thank God that the survival strategies are there. And thank goodness my body did start to shut down because that's showing that it's working.
Yeah. And it's more like your mind against your nervous system, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny to me that people want to go to the doctor so they can like take care of the symptom, but it's like, where is the orientation of like, well, maybe I should change my life. Like, because that's why the breakdown happens. Yeah. Because now, okay, the medicine's not working. Like whatever you're doing to sort of manage is not sufficient enough. It's your lifestyle that needs to change. And people don't actually make those core changes until it's like unbearable to keep going. And so Gina and I have really been thinking about like, how do we create this lifestyle around our personal and professional lives that feels supportive of our body? Because without feeling good in my body, like what is all of this for?
Exactly.
Right? Like I don't want to live in this like panic, fear, stress, sympathetic state. Nothing I even achieve from that state feels good anyways. And it feels more of the same. And so, like you said, thank God for these strategies and thank God they don't work forever and that my body rebels to tell me what it really needs.
Right.
Totally.
And and what is the root? Like, what is the root of all of this? Like even talking about like figuring out how to do things different, like to actually listen to the body and it's disconnection, right? Because when we are disconnected from our bodies, when we're disconnected from ourselves, we're disconnected from others, we're disconnected from nature, there is just so much disconnection. And so we don't have that awareness. We're not hearing our intuition. We cannot, when our body is speaking to us, there is wisdom, there is intelligence, but we're just like, nope, I got to do this thing. Be quiet. I got to do this thing. That's something I did for years. I ignored my intuition. What I now know is my intuition for so long. And then my whole life had to be blown up for me to fucking realize it, you know? And so grateful that I'm where I'm at now, but it's like we truly as humans, like we just make it so complicated. And it's not just our fault, right? Like it's like this is the world that we live in. This is how we're conditioned to show up to life. And so it's like, how can we, the problem with all of this, I think, is truly disconnection. And so it's like, how can we reconnect to our bodies, reconnect to ourselves, reconnect to each other?
I feel like so much of how so many of us operate is like, how do I make more money? How do I have my dream life? How do I get all of these things? And so we're like you said, we're ignoring the call of our body because that's not even in the equation, right? When I thought about what career I wanted to have, I wasn't thinking about, is this going to support my nervous system? Like, I didn't even care about that, right? And now everything I do revolves around my nervous system. Everything. Right? Can, like, it is everything. Even me and Sam, if we have like a meeting and I'm like, I'm not okay right now. We're like, okay, let's just cancel, we'll reschedule. And we don't feel bad about that. You know, and I think,
we've done the thought work around what we make that mean and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I think now living from a place where I prioritize the health of my nervous system and I actually can hear what my body is saying to me, it's a lot easier to strategize, my life or to create a life that I actually do desire. Because I think that's what's so backwards is everybody thinks they want all of this money and this business and all of these whatever it is, but like you said, it's like at the cost of what? Like we're not actually calculating the cost on our bodies, unfortunately, until the equation shows up in our life where we can't ignore it anymore.
Right. And then we get there and we have all the things. And then we're like, wait, like what? This still sucks. Like I need something else. Like this still isn't enough. And so it also is like this culture, which I think is perpetuated in the spirituality world in some spaces of like, you're not enough. Even though we're telling everybody that they're enough as they are, we're like, you need to get this certification and you need to have this thing and you need to do this thing. And it's like, actually, what if we just really honed in on our skills, on our medicine, on our magic, and we were so potent and we just focused on that thing and showed up and served from that place? How powerful would that be? Instead of being like, I have to have all of these things so that I am worthy, so that like we're still looking for that thing outside of ourselves.
Yeah. I would love for you to kind of close us off with your favorite practices. Obviously, I know you love breath work. I would love to hear about how that's changed your life and just any other tools that our listeners can seek in order to help them shift in and out of these states into more safety, so that they don't have to constantly move into this story about how they're a lazy do-nothing who is like just doomed for failure, right? How can we support them into a safe, like ventral state?
Yeah, one thing that I would like to say, just like to kind of like wrap up the conversation before that, is when we're in a sympathetic state, so often that's actually a catabolic process in the body, meaning that means like we are using all the resources, like the food and the nutrition, the energy in the body, and we're breaking it down because we need it. So for example, like I have to run away from this tiger or whatever is chasing after me. So I'm going to use all the resources in my body. Everything's going to go to surviving, right? So like the body is literally breaking down. So this is so just empowering, I think, when we really understand this. And when we're in parasympathetic, especially like the safety pathway or like the rest and digest that is natural, not the survival shutdown state, we are in a reparative or anabolic process where our body is literally rebuilding itself. That's what's happening in the rest and digest. Like our body is repairing, our cells are repairing. We are giving life back to our bodies. And so then rolling into your question, it's like to really true reparative rest is probably the most powerful thing we can do for ourselves, regardless of what state we're in, because that's going to bring us back to safety. That's going to bring us back to where our energy levels are more balanced, where if we're in like that shutdown state, it's going to give us a little more energy to do the things that we need to do or that we want to do. If we're in that sympathetic state, it's gonna just allow our bodies to rebuild a little bit. So it's like these like truly reparative practices, which I kind of spoke to a minute ago of it's nothing. It's like doing nothing and not having
literally
not, which is so hard for so many people, but not having music on, reading a book could go back and forth, but like just really thinking about stimulation and what is stimulating me right now. So I mean, it could literally be like putting earplugs in, like doing like a float. I've actually not done this, but I want to, but like doing one of those like float chambers where there's like literally no sound and where you're really like, people have said that doing that is like getting like 7 hours of sleep because there's no stimulation. Like your body is floating. Yeah. You're not hearing anything. You're not seeing anything. So a way to do that at home without going and doing something like that is putting earplugs in your ears. You don't have to do that, obviously, but putting earplugs in your ears, an eye mask over your eyes, laying in the dark, no sound, no nothing, and just resting. It's also, and I actually don't know the science behind this, so just going to name that, but putting like propping your pelvis region up and letting so like putting like a yoga block or something like that, like laying on the ground, putting like a bolster, a yoga block underneath your pelvis region so that there's kind of like the slant in your body. Like that's the true like posture of rest, and opening your arms up and like, like in like surrender, like I am open, I am here, I am resting. It just feels so good. So that, and then of course breathwork. Like breathwork is just so powerful and for so many reasons, but it's also so accessible. It is so accessible to so many people, and it can literally be something as simple as I am going to breathe in through my nose and sigh out of my mouth until I start to feel some relaxation in my body. Like it's can truly be that simple, and it can be a lot more than that, right? You go and see a facilitator who can guide you through a really, really powerful practice. But it doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be complicated. And also breathing in and out through the nose is probably the most relaxing thing that we can do. So that just some like breath tips. The more that you're breathing in and out through your nose, the better you're going to feel. The more.
Why is that?
Because you're actually activating the parasympathetic system. And not only that, but your nitric oxide is released in the body when you breathe in and out through your nose. And so it's a vasodilator, so it allows the blood to flow more freely throughout your body, throughout your brain, and get to your brain. And oxygen is just delivered more efficiently. So we can be breathing in all the oxygen, but it's not, if we're just mouth breathing, and I know that we do that sometimes in breathwork practices for a different reason, but if we're just mouth breathing all the time, we're breathing in a lot of air. So we're like, I'm getting a lot of oxygen in, but it's not actually being delivered efficiently to the cells. So
Yeah. I mean, breathwork sessions for me have been that's obviously why I took the program. They've been so transformative, but it was so interesting because when I had my first session, I was more feeling it through like the spiritual lens, where I was like, I could feel the energy like leaving my body, and I felt a release. And what I love about breathwork is that you don't really need to understand what's being released or why. You just feel better. And that's really all you need to know. But when you taught your sessions and you connected the science, as you said, you are the bridge between, science and spirituality, it just made so much sense. So I would love for you to just explain, what is happening in our bodies when we're doing breath work? Why are we feeling better and feeling like we're releasing something just by breathing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the nervous system that we've been talking about, like throughout this whole thing. Like when we're actually intentionally bringing the breath in and releasing the breath out, we're settling the nervous system. And so that's like on a physiological level, right? Just by using the breath. So breathing is this like beautiful automatic process that happens all the time. We don't have to think about it. But the power, why breathwork is so powerful, is because when it is like the one thing that we can take conscious control over to shift, it slows our heart rate. It slows, it brings us into this place of rest, this place of safety, because we're able to feel the connection to the body. There's also, and there's not actually a lot of research on this, but when I was still working in the lab, I actually hooked myself up to a transcranial Doppler, which measures blood flow to the brain through like the middle cerebral artery, which like runs right here, and it connects to like the frontal lobe, and it connects to a lot of places. But what that showed, and I just did 20 minutes of like the triactive breath, which is a 3-part all through the mouth breath, probably the most activating breath that we do. And the blood flow to my brain decreased substantially. And in 20 minutes of that breath. So some people might look at that and be like, well, that's not good. Like, you want blood to be flowing to your brain. Like, you want your brain to be oxygenated, right? Because the oxygen travels. Hemoglobin that's attached to the blood cells. But it was me. I'm not a representative sample. I wasn't doing this like in a big group of people. And I haven't seen any other research similar to this, but we're always talking about that the mind can relax, the mind can rest, and it's not, the mind never fully stops. It's like there's still always just like low level of activity when we're sleeping, when we're relaxed, all of that. But my hypothesis, based on my own data, is that it was slowing the activity in like my frontal cortex and like the executive regions of my brain, the thinking brain, right? The parts that make stories and everything, the parts that keep us in suffering, the parts, all of these. And I was able to connect into my emotional brain. And so sometimes that's why that release comes. That's why we're able to just feel things without attaching a story to it, right? But also because it's slowing down this activity, and especially if we get a nice release, then after that, all there is rest. Because we've let that energy out of the body. That's another thing that probably a lot of scientists would be like, yeah, but how do you measure that? Emotions are energy. Like, they truly are, because you feel it. You feel tension in your body. You feel it break up. Yes. You feel it release. And so using the power of the breath to be able to like visualize, just like, I'm sending softness to this place in my back that feels really tight. Like, I get it all the time from clients. Oh my God, that pain just released that I felt for 10 years, and all I had to do was breathe. Like, so it's just this really powerful cleansing practice that also has so much science to back it.
Yeah. How does that work though? I'm always so curious, because my husband has a really chronically painful back, and he knows cognitively that the more he thinks about it and stresses about it, it makes it worse. It just does. And it's that fear, right? Like, what if it doesn't get better? And is it ever going to get better? And then even when it's better, he's worried about when it's going to go out again, right? And so I am so curious though, like how does the pain get released when our body just relaxes? Is it just like the physical tension that's now kind of, like you said, breaking up? I'm curious to know what your explanation is.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't have any like specific science to back this. So that's something that's really hard to study, even if people wanted to pay to study that, which would be funding for that, unfortunately. But that I believe that it's just, and part of it is acknowledgement and acceptance of, right? So Sam, you even talked about just like acknowledging and accepting, just kind of, I mean, both of you did in your experiences, like just kind of accepting where you were and kind of releasing this, also having this wider, and having a wider perspective. So when you're in the state that we talked about, the nervous system states, when you're in the state, it's really hard. You're like seeing through these tiny little like peephole glasses. But breath, what I think breath allows us to do is open ourselves up. We're widening our perspective. We're reaching other levels of consciousness so that we can see our lives more clearly. So suddenly it might shift in that this pain is not here because of XYZ, whatever story I've made up about it. This actually is not going to last forever. Maybe, what is my body saying to me right now? This is the language of the body. What is the body saying to me right now? And sometimes just acknowledging it is enough, which it's magic, right? I don't think there's science to back that. That's just right. That's how it works. And again, the power of the mind connecting with the body. I am visualizing softness, riding on the wave of my breath to this part of my body that feels tight. There's so much power in that because you're using your mind, you're connecting to the body, but it's like in a soft, compassionate way, not a way that's like, I wish this pain would go away. You know, there's such a different energy.
Right. Yes. Like no resistance. Yeah. And like my intuitive response to you, Gina, was like, it is the contraction, the tension that's causing the pain. Because I was getting a massage yesterday, and I have a really like tender spot like around my left glute where like my SI joint gets really agitated. And it's funny because my mind already has an expectation when his palm is going there to start to tense up. And he was like, don't tense up, relax your hip into the table, relax. And he said, do you see how your muscle is fighting me? That's what's causing the pain. As soon as you relinquish that muscle, my palm's going to roll right over and you're going to feel relief. And it was so hard because my mind is already predicting pain. Right. That's the painful spot. Don't go there. And I was going to tell him to release pressure, but it wasn't actually that much pressure. It's because I'm contracting against it because the other side felt fine. It's that I'm contracting against it. And so he said, like, just relax your hip, just relax. And I was like, okay, like, and it feels like death because you're like, I need to protect, I need to, but it's all an illusion. And then as soon as I like got my internal like muscle fibers to just release, then his palm just rolls right over, and I feel that like that relief, like that loosening. And so, I mean, it's hard, easier.
And that I think can also be a metaphor of what's happening in the mind when we have resistance. Right? Because when we resist, we were talking earlier about I must control, I must manipulate so that this can go the way that I want it to. That's resistance, right? Like it's almost like we have this wall and and this is the resistance that we're pushing against, but we're controlling, we're manipulating, we're forcing, and so we're creating more resistance, just like we are in the body. And so it's like if we can both loosen the grip in the body, loosen the grip in the mind. This is why there's this powerful vagus nerve mind-body connection that breathwork is so powerful at connecting or healing, strengthening. It's so powerful. The body leads, the mind follows. It's like this really beautiful reciprocal relationship if we allow it to be. But
I have one more question about the brain because I feel like I could keep talking, but I think this part really helped me when I started to understand this, that you were talking about like the frontal part of your brain. And I think most people don't actually know that there's different parts of your brain, and that when we get into these nervous system states, that the part that's kind of stays online is just that reptilian brain. And like the thinking part goes away. And that actually helped me so much because I was like, oh, that's why like I can't think clearly. That's why I'm not going to make necessarily the best decisions for myself. So I would just love your explanation on, I guess, the different parts of the brain and what turns off when we get into these nervous system dysregulated states.
Yeah, beautiful question. Yeah, so, and I feel like you already described it really well, but it's really just that executive, like planning, reasoning, like logical part of the brain that sometimes can cause a lot of pain and suffering in our life, but also can help us make sense of things sometimes, or allow us to be a voice of reason when we're stuck in a survival state where like we cannot see outside of that, right? Like Sam, you were talking about how when you're in that state, like you're seeing out of the glasses, you're seeing out of the lenses that are colored by that state. And that there is a brain-body connection there too. And that's why we got to start in the body so that then we can shift the mind. But it is, so when we're in like a sympathetic state, or even like the dorsal vagus state, the shutdown, the logical part of the brain goes offline. So we're in like a lot of like parenting books will talk about like the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. And so like children don't even have a developed frontal lobe, like the reasoning logical part of the brain. And so, so that's why there's these tantrums and these they are expressing the feelings in their body in the only way that they know how. And so as adults, we can do the same thing. And it's not because that part of the brain isn't developed. It's because that part of the brain is just offline. Like we're only connected to the emotional, reactionary, fear-based part of the brain. So there's no logic happening. And our thoughts can just be really dark in that place. So we can still have thoughts, but they're very colored by the lenses of the state that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Like for me, I'm never going to be happy again.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and I just believe it. I just believe the thought in that state. But in a different state, I hear that thought and I'm like, that's so ridiculous. It's like, that's right. But it's resonant with my state, that belief, because that belief itself, I can feel the density of it. And it was a match for my energetic state at the time. So that's why I'm believing it. But in a different frequency, the density of that state doesn't really resonate with me. It's kind of like bounces off. It's like, oh, that's just, I can see and feel that that's just a thought energy, as opposed to like, that's my reality now. Yeah. Like that's, this like acceptance where it's like this curiosity, which I think is born out of the safety. We can only be curious in the safety.
And also like when you're in, like there's a ladder. So we can think of like, there's a hierarchy that exists within the autonomic nervous system. This is the last thing I'll say about this, but I think this is important for people to know. When you're in the dorsal vagus, like you have to move through sympathetic energy to get back to safety. So when this even goes back to your question that was like gonna wrap things up a little bit ago, is like when you're so shut down, we gotta invite somehow energy into the body so that we can move through, almost like moving up a ladder from dorsal into sympathetic before we can get into that ventral vagus, because we're so like out of touch. Like we're there's no feeling, there's no energy really. There is energy, but not the kind that we need, right? And so being able to move out of that dorsal place, sometimes that's why, I know sometimes it feels like advice from somebody. It's like, you just don't understand where I'm at. You're just telling me like, well, if you just would do this, then maybe. But there is some support to that. And in the sense of like, what is like when you're in that place, if you have support of somebody to just ask you this question, like, what is one thing that you could do to just invite in a little bit of energy into your body? And, something like going on a walk or just getting outside, like moving from the box of wherever space that you're in, mental and physical, right? And going out where there's bigger space around you, where you can just and moving your body. And so going on a walk, turning on some music and just dancing, like just doing something to bring in a little bit of energy, a little bit of activation, so that maybe then you can connect into the safety.
Yeah, it is hard to hear from that state, like just go for a walk or like just do something. But I can say from my own personal experience, I know that works because from my dorsal vagus state, is that what it's called? The dorsal vagal state. I do remember thinking like, I really need to do something. And even if like, kind of like, you know what, maybe it won't work, maybe it won't, but I'm going to do it anyways. And that was for me going back to my dance classes. And so I found a community where I could show up like once a week. For me, it's like my church now. It's like once a week, we go, we dance and sing in community. And I show up there regardless of whatever expectations I have, whatever state that I'm in, because I know that it's going to raise my statistics of feeling better. I don't expect it to make me feel better. I don't do it just because I already feel good. I'm like, no, like we just go there every week, like regardless of the state. And there are some times where I'm like, I don't feel like dancing. I'm like, I don't want to, right? Like that energy is so, it's like Newton's third law. It's like an option, like an object in motion tends to stay in motion and vice versa. I'm like a log and I'm like, I don't want to move any energy. But then something starts happening when I start doing the warm up, like I activate some fire and then, my mind starts moving in a different way after that. And like something gets kind of kicked up. And so, just for anyone who's listening who might feel like I can't do anything, I don't want to do anything, I just want to lay here, I hope this does inspire you to just move a little, and not with the expectation that you're going to feel amazing afterwards, but like Andrea said, you do need a little bit of energy to go into, you said from dorsal to sympathetic back to safety.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful to hear.
Yeah.
Scientifically.
Yeah.
It is. Because sometimes, like, when you have some anxiety after you're in that state, at least you can know, like, oh, I'm going in the right direction. Because sometimes it's kind of like, wait, why do I feel worse? But that is going up the ladder. That was really
And it's also like, I think it can be empowering for somebody who is in sympathetic all the time. Who's like, God, like, why do I always feel like I have to be doing something? It's like, honestly, being in that state, you're closer to getting back to safety than you are at, you know, there's like this, like, well, we can see like the rose colored, you know, whatever, like I'm not, you know, all the way in the shutdown. Like I'm closer to that desired state than I thought. So it's almost like, cool, I'm proud of me. Like I can be a little proud of me for
Yeah. Well, oh my God, I just thought of something from like an animal perspective. Dorsal vagal literally is like accepting death. It's like you're in the free state and you're like, I'm gonna die now. Like I'm gonna die. Like I'm gonna shut down completely. At least like the flight sympathetic is like I'm like running away. Like, there's a chance that I will get to a safe spot away from this tiger behind me. So that's actually so interesting. I'd never seen it that way. That for the dorsal vagal, the overwhelmed, disassociated, like I'm gonna kill myself state is like that is the state of like death acceptance. Yeah. Like and that's why I have these thoughts of impending doom. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It just feels like doom. It's like doomsday all the time. And I can imagine my body is like, that's because there is now a bear attacking me and I've accepted it. Whereas like you said, the running away is like, there's a chance.
Right.
Yeah. Closer. Safe zone is over there.
That energy back into the body, going back to the animal example, what animals do because they don't have the mind to keep them stuck in the doom, right? Is they shake.
Right.
They shake. It's like a natural response, an innate response that we actually have too, but we're just really good at. Our mind is like, no, that would look weird. It's like, I don't want to shake my body. Like, why am I going to shake my body? But doing something like that, or even just like squeezing your physical body, like a somatic input is some stimulation, some like activation. So if you don't feel like getting up and going to a dance class right away or getting up and going on a walk, it's like, well, what can I do just right here, right now? Well, I could just shake my hands. Maybe that's all I can do right now. And then I can start to shake other parts of my body. Maybe I can just bring a little bit of feeling because we're so numb when we're in that shutdown state. Like I can bring a little bit of feeling and touch into my body from a somatic perspective, kind of like waking the muscles up, waking the cells up, waking the body up. So
Oh my God, that makes so much sense. So helpful.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you guys.
A lot of information here.
Yeah, we're going to need a part 2 one day. I still have so many more questions. There's just so much to know about the brain and body, but I think this is going to be extremely supportive. I mean, for us and for our listeners too. So we'll have all of your information in the show notes where they can find you, the different offerings that you have. But yeah, thank you again for being here.
Guys so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. We do, however, though, have one final question. I can't let you get away without asking you. What sort of theme or life lesson, realization is the one that you've consistently had to spiral through in your life?
Oh, man. I think it's that we're all on our own journey. Meaning when we are showing up from this place of like, or always have had this desire to support other people and help other people and all of that, it's like we can see somebody in these like self-destructive spirals and be like, but if you would just do this, if you would just do, I mean, come and do this with me. This will feel better. That we actually can't make that decision for somebody. We can show them, we can support them, we can guide them, we can give them all the tools, but it's ultimately up to them. And obviously this is a lesson I learned through my husband's death because I tried to help him for so long, for years, didn't feel like I could. And now it continues to show up in some work that I do with people, but also I have my son who is now, he's almost 8. He was 4 at the time that his dad died. And ever since, it's been really hard. It's fucking hard. That's probably the hardest thing of all of it is knowing that I cannot take that pain from him, that he's walking his own journey. And that lesson is in my face over and over and over again. Like he's his own person. We're all on our own journey. We can show up and support each other. And it's up to them, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrea. You've been such a beacon of light today and information and just honestly evidence of what vulnerability and honesty on your path can really lead to. Because it was only when you were willing to look at your situation, your story, all of these things square in the face that you could transform and heal and become a facilitator for so many other people. So thank you for your medicine.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this honest conversation. We hope it brought you peace, clarity, and a little bit further along your spiritual journey.
If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to us if you left us a 5-star rating and a review so we can bring you more conscious conversations, spiritual topics, and guests.
And we lovingly invite you to join our free Spiraling Higher community by clicking the link in the show notes to continue this healing dialogue and share with us how this episode impacted you.
Come on in, introduce yourself, and meet your conscious besties in a safe space for healing conversations between us and other like-minded people on their healing journey.
Here's to Spiraling Higher.